I should have reminded people, look, we'll go through the presentations, and we have a couple additional people who can answer questions, including David Wall and Chagas and Jack Nolan from our own department, head of Nitrates unit. But I'll hand over to Bernard next for his presentation, and when we have the 3 presentations done, I think we'll open for questions. I see there's a number of questions, and I'd like to welcome those into the right-hand side. You'd see an opportunity for asking questions online, and I might be able to draw on those. Thank you. Bernard, please.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Can you see the presentation okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, good evening, everybody. My name is Bernard Harris. I work in Nitrates and Biodiversity Division in the Department of Agriculture and Food. I'm here to discuss the second stage, the Nitrates Action Programme, but the second stage consultation and what this currently proposes. I suppose, look, not to reiterate, but just to highlight some of the issues that Donald has identified. But the future Nitrates Action Programme, where agriculture is a problem, and I think Donald has gone through the various challenges there. But as you can see, phosphorus runoff from poorly draining soils is the biggest issue for rivers and lakes. But as Donald mentioned, there is the trend appears to be stabilising in some areas. From a nitrogen perspective, nitrogen trends are increasing, especially in the estuaries in the southeast. Again, to reaffirm what we see through the EPA water quality monitoring information. But soils, climate and farm practice are very important drivers at farm scale. It's important to point out from a nitrogen perspective how things have changed since the last Nitrates Action Programme and its introduction since 2018. We see a significant level of regionalisation or losses of nitrogen. So our nitrate levels are increasing and losses are increasing, and agriculture is the main source of those losses. There was a spike in nitrogen losses in 2018 due to the climate impacts. However, it must be noted that those losses have been increasing. If we can see the bar chart in the centre, whereby since 2013, the annual loss of nitrogen from catchments with nitrogen issues have increased since 2013. If you take the bar chart on the left-hand side, where nitrogen is not an issue, while there have been slight increases, it's more or less stable over the last number of years. I suppose looking at the overall national livestock herd in general, while since 2015, 2016, there has been a certain stabilisation of the national herd to 2020 to 6.9 million head. The number of dairy cows has incrementally increased since 2014, going from 1.17 to 1.5 billion dairy cows. But with that, as I referred back to the last chart, there has been a significant level of regionalisation within that expansion, and there has been increased pressures in the southeast. Just to look at the overall picture and in terms of derogation farms and farms operating above 170, and it's just important to recognise from a dairy perspective that farms operating above 170 in 2019, these represented 9% of herd numbers, 14% of area, and overall 33% of bovines, or 65% of the overall dairy cows. So these are a significant cohort of farmers. It's estimated as part of the National Farm Survey that dairy in general use above 50% of the overall nitrogen nationally. So it is a significant pressure, and while an intensive cohort, there has been a lot of measures introduced since the derogation review of 2019 to improve efficiency at farm level, and we see a lot of these efficiency measures coming through the system. In terms of the national fertiliser sales since 2009, what we have seen, especially since 2014, is an incremental increase since that time, essentially going from about 330,000 tonnes up to 370,000 tonnes to date. So while there has been an explanatory phase in dairy, all farmers obviously have a role to play in terms of this, but there has been an increase in that nitrogen fertiliser sales since in that period. However, I suppose looking back on basics in terms of looking at efficiency at farm level to ensure that the system itself through soil health and soil fertility actually delivers at a farm level, it is important to note that you know, one of the key drivers around soil fertility is the lime, P and K status of your soil. Excessively using or not efficiently using nitrogen at farm level can create additional losses. So as you can see here from the lime sales figures since 1981 up to 2019, while there has been a stabilization in recent years, more in terms of pH correction is required at a national level. And we'd like to see those figures increasing and the use of lime move higher nationally. From a phosphorus perspective, taking the most recent 2019 National Soil Analysis Programme results, there is a clear evidence here to say that, look, at 77% of our soils are deficient in terms of P. So there is an efficiency piece here that needs to be corrected before, in order to optimize that nutrient use efficiency at farm level. Added to that, look, at while we don't legislate for potassium, 50% of our soils still remain deficient in adequate potassium levels. So there's a significant level of work to be done there in order to correct that, to ensure we improve that efficiency, especially in nitrogen piece, nationally and at farm level. So in terms of what's been proposed under the new GAP regulation measures, there is a suite of measures proposed, and they've been widely circulated as part of this proposal and this second stage consultation. One measure alone won't solve our water quality issues, but a suite of measures in combination will stabilise and protect our water quality into the future, especially as part of the next programme. Looking at specifically areas of concern, obviously slurry storage and management is a key area. We highlighted as part of the consultation process that there is a significant level of additional slurry storage required in some sectors, so it is a significant concern. In terms of its management, it's proposed as part of these regulations that from the 1st of January 2022, it shall be a requirement that all slurry must be applied by the 30th of September in 2022 and by the 15th of September for 2023 and subsequent years. So that's essentially a 2-week, bringing back the spreading period by 2 weeks next year and a further 2 weeks the year after. Additionally to that, from the 1st of January 2023, farmer stock that are greater than 170 must demonstrate clear separation of slurry and clean water management in the farmyard. Looking at the additional measures that need to be, looking at nitrogen management essentially, but also all sources of nitrogen within the farm and nationally. Ammonia and our air quality targets are a big concern, and losing ammonia and losing that source of nitrogen is something that can be additionally recycled within the system. So given the acclimatise recommendations and our meeting our NEC directive targets to 2027, it's proposed that from the 1st of January 2022, all newly constructed external stores must be covered. Added to that, all existing external stores must be covered as soon as practically possible, but no later than the 31st of December 2027. Taking our soil water storage and management a little bit further, I suppose what is proposed within these current proposals is that soil water must be collected and kept separate to slurry on all holdings. From the 1st of January 2022, to reduce the impact of nutrient losses in the riskiest period, the spreading of soil water will be prohibited between the 15th of November and the 15th of January. Looking at a lot of the work that we fund through our agricultural catchments programme, it's clearly identified that, potentially speaking, the higher risk of losses occur during the closed period, and this is one key targeted measure whereby we need to reduce any potential risk of nutrients in this period. All holdings producing soil water must have a minimum 4-week storage in place by the 31st of December 2024 also. In terms of looking at the livestock excretion rate, and I'll cover it a little bit later also, but the Commission have asked us to review all the technical tables of the statutory instrument 605 of 2017, but they've also identified that they'd like and they wanted to see the excretion rate of the dairy cow to be reviewed, because they asked, unlike other countries, have Ireland not got big and small cows? So essentially, we asked Teagasc to scientifically review the outcomes of this, and Lawrence Chalou will cover this in the next presentation. But essentially, what's been proposed as part of this consultation is that the dairy cow is split into 3 bands. The banding of first band 1 is animals producing less than 4,500 kilos of milk have an excretion factor of 80. Band 2, animals producing between 4,500 to 6,500 kilos have a excretion factor of 92. And thirdly, a band 3, those above 6,500 kilos have an excretion factor of 106. So Lawrence will take us through those as part of the next presentation, but this is currently what is proposed in the current proposals. I suppose chemical fertilizers are a big component of the current regulations, and unlike other member states, we have chemical allowances for both nitrogen and phosphorus within our legislation. A couple of changes that are being proposed as part of this consultation is that in 2020, Teagasc updated the Green Book on major and micronutrient advice. So any of the recommendations that concluded from that update will now be, it's proposed that they'll now be included in a revision of the regulation from next year onwards. Additionally, given the current trends and guidance provided in terms of water quality monitoring, etc., there is being proposed a cut in chemical nitrogen and a re-evaluation of Table 12 of the regulation. But what's proposed is there will be a reduction of 10% nationally on our nitrogen allowances, with potentially up to 15% in some areas based on the EPA catchment assessment report. So it is signalling that some catchments will have to do more in terms of protecting water quality with an increased reduction in the allowances being proposed. Also within this, the period when the application of chemical fertilizers to land is prohibited will be extended. So Schedule 4 of the regulation precludes the application of chemical fertilizer from the 15th of September to the 31st of January, depending on location. So those dates will be reviewed with a proposal potentially that they could be extended, either brought back in the back end of the year or extended in the springtime. In terms of grazing land management, in terms of short-term grazing, so only land within 30 kilometres are allowed to be considered in the stocking rate calculation. We see a lot of evidence around potential MAP acres being used to dilute stocking rates at farm level. So this is something that's proposed within the consultation. Currently for nitrates, derogation farms, both commonage and rough grazing are permitted for inclusion for 170 nitrogen per hectare allowance. So this is currently going to be reviewed also with further reduction proposed. But in order to protect these areas further, the whole farm nutrient planning process is proposed to reduce these below the 170 N per hectare threshold, as I explained above. As I mentioned at the outset, I suppose all farmers have a key role to play in water quality, and if you're an extensive farmer, potentially if you're using maybe ring feeder outdoors, the potential for sediment loss for phosphorus is potentially a key issue. Added to that, our tillage sector also has an important role to play. Green cover on tillage land is very important in terms of catching late nitrate, especially after crop senescence after harvest. So to reduce any potential losses of nutrients post-harvest, it is now proposed that shallow cultivation of harvested crops must be undertaken within 7 days post-harvest. Added to that, where there are late harvested crops, so for example, if a potato crop was harvested in maybe late October, November, if those crops are potentially touching a critical source area within a field or bounding a watercourse, what's proposed is potentially additional buffers for those crops in these fields to ensure the protection of either a water body or water course or a critical source area from potential overland flow of either phosphorus and sediment. While a technical issue, organic matter determination at farm level is very important, especially for the use of phosphorus and its efficiency at farm level. but the procedure for the certification of a soil as a mineral soil is provided under the current regulations. However, what's proposed here is to streamline that, and for consistency and accuracy of OM estimation, it is now proposed that from 2022 onwards, all soils in the indicative Teagasc EPA layer for greater than 20% organic matter are required to be soil tested for organic matter from now on. It clears up any uncertainty in relation to this, and it provides a solid soil test to the determination of that soil for organic matter. I mentioned already in the context of overground stores from ammonia loss, etc. But from an air quality perspective, the current regulation provides for the compulsory usage of low emissions slurry spreading equipment for all farmers operating above 170 and irrigation farmers. So that's from 2020 onwards. But in order to meet our targets to 2027, further implementation of less for more farmers will be required. Air quality and ammonia losses, again, nitrogen, looking at nitrogen in on farms within the farm gate is very important. The recycling of this nitrogen through low emission is very important. And the more you can hold within the system, recycle through low emission, and reduce that dependency on chemical nitrogen will be a key factor in terms of bringing the nitrogen management system through this current review process. But in order to align with these targets, the compulsory uses of less will be introduced for all farmers, or it has been proposed it will be introduced for all farmers operating above 100 kilos of livestock N from 2023, and all pig slurry from 2023 onwards. In addition, all organic manures applied to arable land must be by low emission or incorporated within 12 hours of application. There's a number of additional measures proposed. So soil test and a review of the soil methodology has been proposed as part of this review for phosphorus availability. We currently operate on the Morgan's P analysis to determine our soil index for a particular soil. This year or soon, we will be launching a national soil sampling program. We will be adopting additional phosphorus methodology to determine P availability within soil. So that is an exciting program to happen in the next month or so. However, we are seeking views in terms of informing the next regulation on the best methodology to evaluate, to ensure farmers are getting the best advice, that they're using phosphorus correctly, and whatever's been proposed in terms of advice is actually been harnessed by the soil to improve soil health. I mentioned earlier around the review of the technical tables as part of the statutory instrument. So in some instances, the information is not up to date in the technical tables and they haven't been reviewed over a considerable number of years. And these will all be considered as part of the review. Not all will be considered within the current time frame of December. However, the dairy cow has been included as part of this. Others will be included over the timescale of the next programme. Added to that, the nutrient content of livestock manures, including pig and poultry manure, will be reviewed by December. And also whether existing slurry storage capacity figures are considered to accurately reflect changes in animal size over the last number of years will also be considered. Finally, P buildup. P buildup is a very important facility utilised by a considerable number of farmers annually. And it is an important mechanism to balance soil fertility and achieve optimum nutrient use efficiency at farm level. Currently, it can be availed of for farmers operating above 140. However, we're proposing within these current round of proposals to extend this facility to farmers above 100. So it makes it more freely available for farmers to harness additional phosphorus to improve that efficiency piece at farm level, pending obviously additional conditions being adhered to get P build-up approval. Finally, I suppose it's important to recognise the collaborative approach in terms of delivering on a suite of measures to assess the impact of nutrient losses to water at a national level. We are aware that obviously there are other sources of nutrients out there, such as sewage, industrial waste, digestates, for example, that are being recycled within the agricultural system. So as part of this review, this will be reviewed and the use of these materials will be reviewed. However, they are managed by Irish Water through the National Wastewater Sludge Management Plan, and the application of sewage sludge to agricultural land is controlled by local authorities through the maintenance of sludge registers and inspection enforcement programs. But we consider that this needs to be reviewed, brought together, and a consistent approach applied in terms of reviewing all these and looking at all these nutrients collectively within the system. So a comprehensive understanding of the movements of sludges and the application of sludges to agricultural land is required to ensure the existing controls are fit for purpose. So there's a lot of work to be done there. We started that discussion already and hope to conclude it in the coming months. Okay, I think that's it, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bernard. Appreciate it. It's very detailed, folks. But I think it's important to get our heads around what the proposals are. And I know, look, I'd welcome there's many questions being entered into the questions box on the right-hand side where you can access. So I'd like to encourage that.